They told us it was a book, bound in leather, thin pages pressed between rigid covers, as if the infinite could be bound by glue and thread. They told us it was a history, a story of what happened long ago to people who are now dust. And we believed them. We read it like a record, a ledger of names and deeds, a timeline etched in holy ink. But this was the first illusion. The Bible was never meant to be read like a report. It was never meant to be flattened into the brittle geometry of facts. It does not live in dates and dynasties, in maps or monuments. It lives in symbols. It breathes in metaphors. It speaks in a tongue older than language, a tongue carved into the architecture of the soul. Sacred texts do not tell you what was. They tell you what is. They whisper of patterns, of eternal movements that ripple through every age, through every mind that has ever dreamed of God. A literal reading is a closed door. It is the eye staring at the surface of the ocean, never tasting the depth. When the ancient scribes set their hands to parchment, they were not chroniclers of politics. They were not recording the gossip of kingdoms or the census of tribes. They were architects of meaning, builders of inner worlds. They cast their words like seeds into time, knowing the harvest would ripen not in the field, but in the soul. Do you think they cared for accuracy, for dates, for the dry bones of history? Number. They cared for something larger, something that cannot be drawn on a map or measured with a ruler. They wrote for the heart, for the dream, for the part of you that lives beyond the reach of reason, the part that wakes in symbols, that moves in myths. To read literally is to confuse the finger for the moon. It is to grip the husk and throw away the fruit. It is to worship the statue and miss the presence that the statue points to. The Bible is not the letter. It is the breath behind the letter. And breath cannot be caged. It cannot be inked or pressed or bound. Listen, Scripture is not a window into the past. It is a mirror held up to the eternal now. It is not a diary of what happened once upon a time. It is a map of what happens again and again in the secret theater of the action since. Soul. Every garden in its pages blooms within you. Every serpent coils in the roots of your own being. Every exodus is your escape from the prisons you build within yourself. Every crucifixion and every resurrection takes place on the hidden stage of your own becoming. This is the nature of sacred language. It speaks in signs. It veils the invisible in stories. It clothes the infinite in parables. Those who cling to the naked letter wander the desert and never taste the well. They break their teeth on shells and never find the pearl. For the well is deep and the water is hidden. And only those who read with more than their eyes will drink. Before we can understand the Scriptures, we must first understand the mind that wrote them. Not the modern mind, not the mind shaped by science, by statistics and spreadsheets, by headlines and calendars. The ancient mind. Step into that world, and everything changes. There is no word for fiction. There is no word for symbol, because symbol is the very fabric of reality. To the ancient, the world was not a machine made of matter. It was a living presence, a vast, breathing organism. The sun was not a ball of gas. It was a god, an eye of fire peering through the heavens. The river was not liquid and minerals. It was a spirit flowing through the veins of the earth. The mountain was not rock. It was the spine of the world, the place where heaven touched the soil. Every tree, every stone, every gust of wind was a word in a cosmic language. When they saw lightning split the sky, they did not run to books of physics. They whispered the names of gods. They trembled before living power. This was their cosmos, a weave of meanings, a tapestry of forces, each thread alive with presence. And into this world, they wrote their stories. Do you see what that means? When they spoke of Eden, they were not writing geography. They were describing a condition, a state of unbroken harmony, a consciousness before the wound of division. When they told of the serpent, they did not imagine an animal crawling on its belly. They saw a mystery, a coil of power, a current that whispers of awakening, that tempts you into knowledge, and by knowledge, casts you into exile. Exile from what? From the garden or from innocence? When they wrote of the flood, did they care for cubits and rainfall? Or did they dream of a deeper drowning, a deluge of chaos sweeping through the soul, a dark tide that erases the old self so that something new may rise upon the waters? The Bible is full of rivers and deserts, of mountains and storms. And yes, you can trace them on maps. You can search for ruins in the sand, but the true terrain is inside you. The ancients knew this. Their stories were never meant to chain you to the dust of the past. They were meant to open doors in the present. They were not maps of history. They were maps of the invisible guides for the inner pilgrimage, paths for the soul to walk. But here is the tragedy. We no longer see this world. We look at trees and see timber. We look at rivers and see resources. We measure, we weigh, we dissect. And in doing so, we silence the language of the sacred. The modern mind demands facts. It worships data. It bows before the idol of literal truth. And so it reads scripture as if it were a report and misses everything. For myth is not the opposite of truth. Myth is the vessel of truth. It does not tell you what happened once upon a time. It tells you what always happens. What happens now. What happens in every soul that dares to awaken. The ancients lived in a sea of symbols, and their stories were waves on that sea shapes of meaning rising and falling, never fixed, always alive. To read them literally is to drain the ocean and stare at the sand, to strip the tree of leaves and ask where the forest has gone. But to read them as they were meant, as metaphors, as mirrors, as maps of the inner cosmos, is to step back into that living world, to feel the pulse beneath the page, to hear the silence speaking through the ink. This is the challenge of our age, to recover the eyes of the ancient, to see once more that the cosmos is not dead matter, but living symbol. For only then will the Bible speak again, not as a corpse dissected on the table of reason, but as a flame, dancing, shifting, calling you home. A sacred text is never simple. It is never flat. It is never what it seems. The Bible is not a single story. It is not one thread. It is a tapestry, woven with layers, fold upon fold, world within world. To the untrained eye, it is a plain surface, a page filled with words. But those who know, those who have eyes that see and ears that hear, they sense the depth. They know the words are not walls, they are doors. Every verse is an archway, every sentence a threshold. The ancients understood this. The mystics preserved it. The rabbis spoke of it. They called it Paradis, an orchard of meaning. 4 paths through the text. 4 levels of reading the Torah. The first, Peshat, the simple, the surface, the literal sense. The garden gate, the story told for those who cannot yet see beyond the story. The second, Remez, the hint, the suggestion, the whisper between the lines, a glance towards something more. The third, Darash, the allegorical, the moral teaching, the layer that instructs the soul, the path of ethics, of how to walk in the world. And the fourth, Sod, the secret, the hidden current, the fire behind the veil, the truth that cannot be spoken, only hinted, only breathed in silence. These four are not steps on a ladder. They are dimensions, depth spiraling inward. The deeper you go, the less the text seems like text at all, and the more it becomes a mirror of infinity. The Christian mystics knew this too. Origen wrote that Scripture has a body, a soul, and a spirit. The body is the letter, the flesh of words. The soul is the moral sense, how one should live. The spirit is the mystical vision, the breath of God moving through the labyrinth of signs. Augustine warned against those who cling to the letter and kill the spirit. For the letter kills, he said, but the spirit gives life. Do you see? This warning is as old as the text itself. The danger of mistaking the husk for the seed, the shell for the fruit. The Bible was never one thing. It was a prism. White light entering, splitting into 1,000 colors. Each color a truth, each truth a ray, shining toward the same sun. But we took the prism and crushed it. We demanded only one color. We built creeds like cages. We nailed the text to the cross of literalism and wondered why the spirit fled. For the spirit cannot be chained to grammar. It will not live in the prison of one interpretation. The mystics knew this. The Kabbalists turned every letter into a universe. They said the Torah was written with black fire on white fire, and even the spaces between the letters were alive. For the silence speaks as much as the word. They counted letters. They rearranged them. They meditated on their shapes. Not because they believed in puzzles, but because they knew the text was not ink on parchment. It was a living force, a breath crystallized into language, a river of meaning flowing from the infinite into time. And the Gnostics, they whispered that the scriptures were veils, layers hiding a hidden flame. Those who read literally walked in shadow, while those who pierced the veils saw the light behind all forms. This is the truth of sacred writing. It is inexhaustible. You can read the same verse 1,000 times and never touch the bottom, because the bottom is not there. There is no floor, no final meaning. Only spirals, only depths opening into deeper depths, like mirrors reflecting mirrors into eternity. This is why the Bible survives, not because it is a history book, not because of its facts, but because it is a living text, a labyrinth that changes as you change, a map that shifts as you move, a mirror that shows you not what was, but what is becoming within you. Those who cling to the letter miss everything. They drink from the rim and never taste the wine. They see the shell and never find the pearl. They walk the orchard and starve at the gates, because they do not know that the fruit was never on the branches. It was always in the depth, and the depth is calling. There was a time when the text was alive, when words burned like torches in the dark, when every letter was a threshold, every parable a door to the infinite. But that time began to die. Something happened, something vast and slow, a shadow stretching across the centuries. The spirit was caged. The living word was bound in chains of ink and iron, and literalism rose like a crown of thorns pressed upon the brow of the sacred. Why? Why did men take the prism and grind it into dust? Why did they strip the garment of metaphor and worship the naked letter? The answer is not mystery. It is power. Faith began as fire. A secret flame passed from soul to soul, glowing in catacombs, in hidden rooms, in whispers carried by the wind. But empires fear fire, because fire cannot be ruled. It leaps beyond boundaries, consumes thrones, burns through the nets of law. And so the rulers came. They saw the flame and trembled, not with awe, but with hunger. for control. If the spirit is wild, it must be tamed. If meaning is infinite, it must be confined. An emperor cannot govern symbols. A council cannot decree dreams. But a literal law, a fixed creed, a single interpretation proclaimed as absolute that can be chained to the throne. And so it began. The 4th century. An empire bleeding, crumbling under its own weight. A ruler seeking unity at any cost. The council was called. The bishops gathered, and a book once fluid as a river was frozen into a wall. Dogma was forged like iron in the furnace of politics. What was once a living mystery became a system, a cage of propositions, a creed recited under threat of fire and sword. This was the birth of literalism as weapon. No longer was Scripture a labyrinth of symbols. It was a code of law, a tool for obedience, a mask worn by power, and behind that mask, the face of empire smiled. Do you think this was new? It number. It had happened before. It would happen again. Every time spirit descends, there are those who rise to capture it. Every time truth is spoken in parables, there are those who hammer them into statutes. Because metaphor is dangerous. Metaphor whispers freedom. It says, interpret, imagine, enter the mystery, and make it your own. And tyranny hates that whisper, because a free imagination cannot be ruled, because a soul that reads inwardly cannot be chained outwardly. And so the rulers built their walls. They declared, this is the meaning, there is no other. They turned the garden of Scripture into a courtroom. They turned the song of prophets into decrees written in stone. And the people obeyed, out of fear, out of ignorance, out of the terror that burns in every heart when faced with fire and sword. But what died in that moment was not only freedom. What died was the breath of the sacred. For the letter kills, and when the letter rules, the spirit flees. The Bible, that living labyrinth of symbols, became a monument, cold, silent, guarded by priests who warned the faithful not to wander beyond the walls. And yet, the walls still whispered. The stones still hummed with echoes. The mystics heard it. The heretics heard it. Those who dared to dream heard the faint pulse of the infinite beating beneath the iron cage. They burned for it, and many burned because of it. Literalism triumphed, but its victory was hollow, for you cannot kill a symbol. You can bury it, chain it, nail it to a cross of dogma, but in the silence of the grave, it waits. It waits for those who will dig, those who will remember that the Bible was never a prison. It was a path, a door, a ladder of meaning stretching from the dust of the earth to the unspoken heights of heaven. And the ladder still stands, beneath the ruins, beneath the ash of burnt heretics, beneath the stones where councils built their thrones, waiting for you. The Bible speaks, but it does not speak in the tongue of newspapers. It does not speak in the dialect of historians. Its language is older, deeper, a language carved not in grammar, but in the bones of the psyche. It is the language of symbols. To those who read literally, symbols seem like decorations, ornaments draped upon a story. But the truth is the opposite. The story is the ornament. The symbol is the substance. Symbols are the architecture of meaning. They are bridges between worlds, between the visible and the invisible, between the mind and the mystery. And the Bible is built of them. Every tree, every river, every mountain and serpent and star is more than itself. Each one hums with layers of resonance, each one a door into the inner cosmos. Consider the garden, Eden, not a plot of soil fenced by rivers, but a state of being, a wholeness before fracture, a consciousness before division. In the garden, there is no good or evil. There is no shame, no separation, only the stillness of oneness, the eternal now. And then a tree, the tree of knowledge. What is knowledge? Not facts, not information. Knowledge is duality. To know good and evil is to split the seamless whole into opposites, to fall from unity into polarity, to awaken to difference, and by awakening, to lose innocence. And the serpent, what is it? Not a reptile, not a zoological curiosity. It is a whisper coiled in the roots of being, a current of desire, a force that says, awaken, taste, become more. The serpent is wisdom and temptation, creation and destruction, the double-edged energy of evolution. And when the fruit is eaten, when the eyes are opened, what happens? Shame, division, exile, not from geography, from the undivided self, from that silent Eden within. Now, the flood. Do you imagine rain clouds swelling, waters rising over hills? Perhaps such a flood once came, but that is not the point. The point is this: the flood is chaos. The waters of the deep breaking their bounds, the soul drowning in shadow, the old world washed away. Every flood in Scripture is an ending and a beginning, a purging, a death that births new life. It is the dark tide that sweeps away the false self so that something higher can emerge on the dry land of a new dawn. And the ark? Not a boat for animals, a vessel for essence, a container for what must endure through the storm of dissolution. The ark is the innermost core of being, that spark of spirit that survives the flood, that carries you through the chaos to the mountain of renewal. The symbols multiply. The mountain where the law is given is not a peak of rock, but the summit of the soul. The wilderness is the dry season of the heart. The promised land is not soil under foreign skies, but the kingdom within. And what of the cross? The axis where the vertical meets the horizontal, heaven and earth intersecting in the agony of transformation, the self stretched and broken so that something deathless can awaken. Every crucifixion is the death of the old, every resurrection the birth of the eternal in you. Do you see now? These are not stories of them, they are maps of you. Every page a mirror, every symbol a key, unlocking doors in the labyrinth of your own soul. But when the key is mistaken for the door, when the sign is mistaken for the thing it signifies, then the meaning dies. The river becomes ink, the fire becomes ash. Literalism kills not by violence, but by suffocation. It smothers the symbol beneath the weight of fact. It says, this is what happened, this is all it means, and the door slams shut. But for those who see, the Bible is not a corpse to dissect. It is a living code, a spell cast across the centuries, a dream dreaming through you as you read. The serpent still speaks, the tree still stands, the ark still waits for you to enter. The flood still rises in the depths of your own unconscious, and the cross still casts its shadow across the threshold of your becoming. This is the hidden language of symbols. It does not tell you what happened once. It tells you what is happening now, always now. For myth is not history. Myth is eternity disguised as a story. And eternity is whispering your name. When the letter kills, it does not kill gently. It kills with fire. It kills with iron. It kills with crowns and scepters and swords dipped in the language of heaven. What began as poetry became policy. What began as a song of the soul became a code of law carved in stone, wielded like a weapon. Literalism is not a harmless mistake. It is a plague. It is the serpent of misunderstanding coiling around the tree of life and choking the breath of spirit. Because when you take a symbol and flatten it into fact, you strip it of depth. You turn a living stream into a stagnant pool. And when the water stagnates, it breeds death. The history of that death is written in blood. Think of the wars, crusades marching under banners sewn with holy words. Think of swords raised because someone dared to read the same verse and hear a different song. Think of inquisitors sharpening their tools in the name of truth. Think of flames devouring bodies whose only crime was to say, "Perhaps this text means more than you claim." The racks, the chains, the black smoke curling into the sky, all justified by Scripture, by the holy letter hollowed of spirit, filled with dogma, weaponized for power. But the violence is not only outward, it is inward. It seeps into the soul like poison. When you read the Bible as history, you exile yourself from its heart. You walk in the desert and call it a garden. You drink sand and call it water. The letter without spirit is not faith. It is idolatry, the worship of ink, of grammar, of frozen forms. And so the soul starves, because facts cannot feed it, dates cannot ignite it, rules cannot awaken it. Literalism reduces the infinite to a checklist. It trades mystery for certainty. It offers the illusion of control and demands the sacrifice of wonder. But wonder is the pulse of spirit. And when wonder dies, religion becomes machinery, a system, a lifeless engine grinding in the dark, powered by fear. Fear. This is the true root of literalism. Fear of ambiguity, fear of freedom, fear of the boundless ocean of meaning. To step into that ocean is to surrender, to admit you do not know, to drift where no map can guide you. And fear cannot bear that. So it builds walls, it draws lines, it writes decrees. This is what it means, this and nothing more. And people obey, because certainty is easier than silence, because rules are easier than mystery, because to kneel before the letter feels safer than to walk the path of spirit where the ground dissolves beneath feet. But the cost of that safety is the death of the sacred. Look at the world that rose from this fear. Doctrines hardened like stone, councils gathering to decide which words live and which are cast into fire, heresies hunted, voices silenced, mystics chained in, dungeons because they dared to say, "God is larger than your creed." And outside those walls, wars raging, cities burning, rivers of blood flowing in the name of truth, all because men forgot that the Bible was not a sword. It was a song, not a code of conquest, but a compass pointing inward. Even now, the shadow lingers. Even now, the letter shouts louder than the spirit. Churches rise like fortresses. Preachers thunder from pulpits, insisting the infinite can be captured in one translation, one doctrine, one riddle line, and millions believe them, because it is easier to obey than to awaken. But every time you obey the letter and betray the symbol, something in you dies, something vast, something luminous. And the silence that follows is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of a tomb. The dangers of literalism are not in the past. They are here, now. Every time a text is wielded like a weapon, every time fear masquerades as faith, every time a soul trades mystery for certainty and calls it salvation. This is the tragedy, that the Bible, a living map of the inner cosmos, was nailed to the wall like a dead specimen. that its parables, doors into eternity, were welded shut with locks of doctrine. But listen closely. If you press your ear to those doors, you can still hear something, a faint sound, like wind moving through leaves, like a whisper rising from the stones. It says, "Come deeper. The garden is still here. The well is not dry. The Spirit still moves." But only for those who dare to look beyond the letter, who dare to break the chains of fear, who dare to remember that truth is not a wall, but a horizon, and the horizon is infinite. There is another way, a path older than pulpits, wider than walls, brighter than any creed, the way of the esoteric reading. To read the Bible not as a record of things long past, but as a living mirror, not as a chronicle of kings and deserts and wars, but as a dream woven with symbols, shimmering with truths too vast for prose. To read, not with the eyes of flesh, but with the inner sense. This is what the mystics knew. This is what the prophets whispered, that the true scripture is written in the soul, that the letters on the page are but shadows cast by a light that burns beyond language. So how does one read esoterically? First, you slow down. You stop rushing for meaning as if it were a coin to seize. You let the words breathe. You listen for the silence between them, for in that silence the hidden voice speaks. Second, you release the craving for certainty. You let go of the demand. What does this mean? Because a symbol does not answer. It opens. It blooms like a flower in the dark, unfolding petal by petal in the depths of your own awareness. You do not conquer the text. You let it conquer you. You let it work on you like a slow alchemy, dissolving, transforming, burning away the husks of the literal until only essence remains. The Bible, read this way, is not a law book. It is a labyrinth. You do not march through it with maps. You wander. You lose yourself. You let the corridors turn and twist until suddenly you find a door that was not there before. And behind that door, a garden, a flame, a silence vast as the stars. Every story becomes a symbol, every name a key. Adam is not a man of clay. He is your unawakened self, the innocence before the fracture. Eve is not a woman of ribs. She is your longing, your desire for experience, the impulse that draws you out of stillness into the spiral of becoming. The serpent is not an enemy. It is a force, the whisper of transformation, the power that says, you can be more, but the price is everything you know. The flood is not rain. It is the dark tide of the unconscious rising to swallow your certainties, to wash away the brittle structures of ego, so that the seed of spirit may root in clean soil. The Exodus is not a march through sand. It is the soul fleeing its own Egypt, the chains of habit, the tyranny of fear. And the wilderness? The long, dry night of the heart, where all idols fail and only the hidden God remains. And the promised land? Not a strip of earth under foreign skies, but the kingdom within, the still center beyond duality, where milk and honey are the sweetness of unbroken being. Even the cross, that axis of suffering, is not merely wood on a hill. It is the point where the horizontal of time meets the vertical of eternity, where the finite self is stretched and shattered, so that something deathless can awaken. Every crucifixion is the death of the old in you. Every resurrection is the birth of the eternal beyond the shell of the ego. When you read this way, the Bible ceases to be a book. It becomes a map of the inner cosmos, a mirror of your own becoming. Every verse a signpost, every parable a doorway, every image a cipher for the states of consciousness through which the soul must pass. And here is the great paradox. When you stop asking, "Did this happen?" and start asking, "What does this awaken in me?" then the text becomes true in a way that history could never make it true. Because the real meaning of Scripture is not in the past, it is in the present. It is in the trembling hush of this very moment, when a line catches fire in your mind and something ancient stirs in your blood like a memory that was never yours and yet is older than the world. To read esoterically is to take the text into the heart like bread into the body, to chew it slowly, to let it dissolve, become one with your breath, your blood, your silence. This is what it means to eat the book, not to memorize, not to weaponize, but to become it, until the garden blooms again inside you, until the serpent speaks again and you understand its whisper, until the flood rises and you do not drown, but are born anew on its tides, until the cross casts its shadow and you spread your arms wide and say, "Yes, let it be done, for only in the breaking is the breaking open." This is the path, not of dogma, but of mystery, not of answers, but of awakening. The Bible was never a cage. It was a key, a door, a ladder of signs leading upward, beyond the letter, beyond the fear, beyond the smallness of certainty, into the wide, burning silence where all words dissolve and only the word remains. And that word is not written in ink, it is written in you. There is a point where words must end, where speech becomes shadow and silence begins to glow. The Bible was never meant to be a wall. It was never meant to be a cage for the infinite. It was a door, always a door. But we built fortresses around the door. We locked it. We carved the key into monuments and forgot the hand that was meant to turn it. Now the door stands, half buried in the ruins of certainty, and behind it a vastness without name. That vastness is the mystery. The mystery is older than any book, older than ink, older than language itself. It breathes in the spaces between your thoughts. It hums in the dark corridors of your blood. It flickers at the edge of dreams. The Bible points to it, like a finger pointing toward the sun. But we stared at the finger, argued about the shape of the nail, the color of the skin, and never turned our eyes to the light. This is the tragedy. And yet, the light has not dimmed. To return to the mystery is not to abandon the text. It is to let the text dissolve, to let its symbols sink like seeds into the soil of the soul and break open there in silence. It is to step beyond the need for answers, beyond the hunger for certainty, to enter the sacred unknowing where the mind bows low and the heart opens wide. For the mystery does not live in definitions. It lives in depth, in the unmeasured, in the ocean no map can chart. And yet, you can feel it, even now, in the slow breath of this moment, in the hush that lingers between these words. Listen, do you hear it? It is the pulse behind creation, the rhythm behind time, the silence that is not absence but fullness overflowing like a chalice that cannot be emptied. This is what the prophets touched. This is what the mystics sought in caves and deserts. Not doctrines, not dogmas, but this quiet fire that burns without smoke, this presence too vast for names. They wrapped it in symbols because nothing else could hold it. They clothed it in parables because naked truth blinds the eyes of the unready. But the clothing is not the body. The symbols are not the flame. To return to the mystery is to strip away the garments, one by one, until the fire touches your skin, until the silence speaks without words, until you realize the thing you sought in the pages was seeking you all along. The garden you longed for is not in the east. It blooms in the center of your being. The serpent coils at the root of your spine. The ark waits in the secret chamber of your heart. The mountain where the law thunders is the peak of your own awareness. The cross stands at the crossing of your own breath, where time and eternity meet in the space between inhale and exhale. And God? God is not a king on a throne, not a name in a creed, not an idol of ink. God is the breath moving through you now, the stillness beneath the noise, the light that cannot be seen because it is the very seeing. To return to the mystery is to return to yourself, but not the self you think you are. The deeper self, the root, the silent depth where all opposites fall away, where the seeker and the sought are one. This is the secret every scripture guards. This is the secret no creed can hold, that the infinite cannot be spoken, and yet everything speaks it, that the truth cannot be written, and yet every letter burns with its shadow. The Bible was never the destination. It was the road, and the road is not the journey. The journey is the walking, the opening, the surrender to a horizon that never ends. So close the book, not in dismissal, not in disdain, but in reverence, as you would close the eyelids of a beloved teacher whose words have done their work. Then listen. Listen for the echo the text has left in you, not as sentences, but as spaces, as questions that hum like stars in the dark. Follow those questions. Let them lead you beyond the edges of thought, beyond the scaffolding of certainty, into the wilderness where there are no maps. For there and only there does the mystery bloom like a black rose in the garden of unknowing. And when you stand before it, you will have no words. You will have no need of words. For the truth the Bible points to does not speak in language. It speaks in light, in silence, in the breath that moves through you now. The mystery has never left you. It has only waited for the day you would turn from the letter and step into the Spirit, waited for the moment you would cease to ask, "What does it mean?" and begin to live what cannot be spoken. That moment is now. The door is here. The key is already in your hand. Turn it, step through, and vanish into the light that no book can hold.